Welcome back to the Leadership Autopsy, everyone. This is Authentically Noelle. This is a podcast where we cut open the real stories behind leadership decisions, failures, and turning points. No theory, no corporate gloss, just the honest truth. Today's episode for me is going to be very personal. It's a moment where I realized I had to walk away from a company and a leader that I really loved and that I respected, because I wasn't the leader that I needed to be. And I'm challenging the myth today that I see repeated way too often on like LinkedIn posts and other platform posts where people leave leaders. I'm not saying that that's not true, that people don't just leave leaders. What I'm saying is that it's not that simplistic. It's a lot more complicated. So listen to my story, and hopefully you can relate to some of this, because as a leader, you need to understand the complexities that people truly have to deal with in their career. And sometimes even you can be the best leader, but people need to leave. So as always, if you like what you hear, hit the like button. If you want to know when I'm going to drop new episodes, hit the subscribe button. So let's get into this. This is the interrogation of what impacts decisions to leave an organization.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So my situation was I was mid-career. I was probably, I'd say, in my mid to late 30s. And I was working at a site that eventually had to be shut down, unfortunately. It was a smaller site. Business made a decision that they were going to close that facility. And if you've ever been part of a shutdown, you know how emotional that weight of doing something like that is on you as a leader. And one of the things when I realized when we were closing the site was I was so blindsided that that was coming, because I really truly didn't understand the impact of the profit and loss and be able to see that coming earlier. And I was kind of living in my bubble. Like I can impact all of my operational metrics, and they were all doing well. The one monetary piece was, how do I control my cost? You know, but I understand the whole business and how the business operates cross-functionally. I just didn't have that same experience to build that knowledge. So when the dust settled, I had to make a decision. You know, once we were going through the shutdown process, we made the decision, we'd communicated the decision. I stayed with the team, you know, through the shutdown, but at some point I had to make a decision. Am I going to stay with this company and go to another facility and move and go to that facility? Or would I step outside of this organization to gain more experience? And as I mentioned, here's the thing. I loved that company. And even to this day, I have wonderful experience with people that were mentors. I had so many fabulous mentors when I was at that company that helped to develop me as a leader. I loved my immediate leader. It's not like there was a toxic culture at this company. It wasn't that I was running away from, you know, bad leadership or a culture that just didn't fit with me. But it was just something different. It was when I had to make the decision or communicate the decision. I didn't make the decision, but when I had to communicate the decision of shutting the plant down, I had a realization. As I was thinking about my next move, something really hit me hard. I had been making operational decisions for years, again, working in manufacturing. That was my kind of functional knowledge, expertise, if you will. But I didn't fully understand the business drivers behind all of that and the more strategic, you know, kind of M&A, if I'm going to do an M&A, if I'm going to do a shutdown. I didn't understand a lot of the numbers and rationale that went into those decisions. So I knew I could run a plant. I could run any plant. I could lead people. I could execute. But when it came to the broader profit and loss, the full financial picture, I didn't have the exposure that I really needed to be able to be the optimal leader, I felt like, for my teams in the company. And that scared me. at the end, at the end of the day, that scared me, because you can't be an effective leader if you don't understand the financial engine you're operating inside of. You can't influence strategy if you don't understand the levers that move the business. And you can't make the best decisions for your team and for your people if you don't understand the cost, the trade-offs, and those long-term implications. And I realized something very uncomfortable during that process, that very, very, very emotional, I would say it was super emotional, high stress, what I was going to do next, decision-making process. And the answer was I wasn't leaving the company or because of a leader. I was leaving because I wasn't the leader that I needed to be yet. And I needed to go and explore different business models to make sure that I understood, how different businesses operated. I've been working, basically the business was a commodity business and, low margin, high volume. But that was really all I was exposed to. And I realized that I needed to have more of a variety of different type of business models out there to be the best leader that I could be for my team. So I made this was the hardest professional decision that I made in my career. And my decision was I left the company that I loved. Again, not because I was unhappy and not because I was pushed out, not because of politics or culture. I left because I needed to grow in ways that this role and the company couldn't give me at that moment. I needed exposure to more of the business finances to become the most well-rounded leader that I could be for my teams moving forward. I needed to understand how a business actually made money, not just on how to control spending. I needed to see the broader functional interactions, not just my functions. And I knew that if I didn't go and get that experience, I'd hit a ceiling and not be the best leader for my teams and being able to make the best decisions for the company. And it wasn't because I put those limits there or somebody else put those limits there for me. It was because I would have been putting that limit there for myself by not reaching out and trying to explore other business models. So the lesson here is, and here's the leadership autopsy around this. And I think it really hopefully hits the heart of a lot of people that might go through this in your career. People don't just leave bad leaders. Yes, they do. I'm not saying that they don't. Okay. Don't flood, the comments that, oh, that's not true. Yes, they do leave bad leaders, but sometimes they leave good leaders because they're trying to become better themselves. And sometimes the most loyal thing you can do in your career is to walk away from comfort. It's hard. It was so hard because it was a company. This was my second company that I worked for. And I knew the businesses. I knew the company culture. So walking away from that, and I was viewed highly as a high potential employee. It was the hardest decision that I had to make. But, sometimes you leave not because the environment is wrong, but it's because the environment is no longer enough for what you need to do to fulfill your destiny as a leader. And leaders, this part is for you. If someone leaves your team, don't assume it's just about you. Explore the opportunity, because it could be if you're getting a lot of, engagement scores that aren't good, or you're getting high turnover on your team for whatever reason. I mean, there might, and peers are giving you certain feedback, listen to that feedback. But it's not always that somebody leaves a team just because of you. Sometimes it's about the growth that they can't get where they are. Sometimes it's about the experience that they need to become the leader that you would want to work for. And great leaders don't trap people. Great leaders create people who eventually outgrow them. And I would, give a call out to the leader that I was under at that time, because he and I had a lot of similarities in our upbringing. He, but unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever, he had stayed with this company, throughout his career. But through our interactions, I knew what he was telling me, which was, if you want this, you're going to have to leave to grow. And I took that under consideration again very closely before I made that decision. And the best thing about leaders is they don't hold you back. A good leader is willing to let you go, kind of like the bird out of the nest, right? They're willing to let the, baby bird, go out the nest and try to fly on their own. And the company that I had worked for had always cultivated that in me. Even from my second leader in that company, I remember him telling me, Noelle, every year you should be interviewing outside the company. He told me this. Again, I was a high potential. They paid for me to get an MBA. So it wasn't an issue that I wasn't performing. But the question or the feedback that he was trying to give to me was, you need to know your value. You need to know what else is out there. And that was the type of company that I was working for, was one that was willing to cultivate that within, the younger leaders so that, they could become the best people leaders possible. And so in closing, I would say that leaving that company was very painful. And today, even when I look back at it, sometimes I wonder, did I make the right decision or not? I don't know. Time will tell. But I did love working for that company, and I love the people in that organization. And I still keep up with, many of the people, especially at the site that we ended up having to close. I keep up with them all the time on Facebook and other, social platforms. But it was the decision that changed that trajectory of my leadership career ultimately, because I did go out and I found different opportunities to look at different business models and get a much more well-rounded understanding of how to run businesses and be a better business leader, if you will, not just a people leader. But I think those kind of go hand in hand. You have to understand the business to be able to articulate to people why decisions are being made one way or another. That's so important. And that was all because I started to understand more around the profit and loss statement, and not just things that I could control within the profit and loss, but how the business itself operated under the profit and loss statement. Because once I understood the business decisions and the business engine, if you will, my decisions got a lot sharper, my confidence got sharper, and my leadership became more complete. So if you're listening to this and you're at that crossroad, ask yourself, are you leaving because of your leader, or are you leaving because of the leader that you want to be? And I think that's an important reflection moment for folks, is don't just leave a single leader. And I've talked about this in another episode. Don't just leave a single leader. Leave for something that's bigger than that, because it's a difficult decision and it is a difficult road moving forward. But you want to have, I don't want to be running away from something. I want to be running to something. I always tell people on my teams that, are having just when we have discussions about what do you want to do next, or people that used to work for me and they're struggling and they're maybe wanting to leave a company, and it's talking with them about, it's not about running away. Don't ever find yourself in a position that you want to leave something because you're running away, because then you're just going to repeat the mistake. You need to be really, really clear about what are you running to? What's the intent? Because then you'll make better decisions on where you land. And so that's the verdict. Thank you for listening. This is Leadership Autopsy, authentically Noelle.
1, 2,